Welcome to the Nicole Osei Report. I'm Nicole Osei, and today we're going to be talking about the sea change between the relationship between the United States and our ally, Ukraine. And I wanted to get the perspective of a Ukrainian amidst this new situation that we're facing and the way that the United States has been going forward. I'm honored to welcome Olena Jacobs. She is a entrepreneur here in North Texas and an advocate for her community. Welcome, Elena.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me, Nicole.
Before we get into the Trump administration's actions when it concerns Ukraine, like halting military aid and that Oval Office meeting seen around the world, that shocking meeting that we witnessed, I wanted to ask you about what it's been like for you as a Ukrainian, seeing what's gone on since Russia invaded your country 3 years ago in terms of just the thousands of lives lost, the destruction, and having to watch that from afar. What has that been like?
Oh, it's been the 3 most terrible years of my life. It's a horror. It's a nightmare that you wake up to every day, and it seems like it never ends. At the same time, there were lots of nice moments, like meeting new people and solidifying this community of supporters, of people who do care, who want to be part of the solution, not a problem. So it's been very, very busy. It's been very eventful, very bad, and with some good moments as well. But mostly painful, of course, mostly painful.
And can you talk about how that outpouring of support, what that means to someone when you're somewhat, you are deeply connected to this war, but you're also having to watch from afar. Can you just kind of talk about how that boosts the morale of a community when you're watching your country go through something as devastating as war?
Well, it means the world. It inspires people, and it gives them hope to keep going. And not like they actually need. I actually find myself being inspired by people in Ukraine more often, maybe than well. That's my personal feeling, but it goes both ways. Um, of course, fighting a war like that, it's you remember how let's say 3 years and 1 month ago, nobody in the world believed that Ukraine would be able to withstand such an invasion. There was it was all public. It was all covered by media and exposed all the Russia's plans. And I just want to remind everyone that. Sort of in relation to the White House talk last Friday, when J.D. Vance was accusing president that he wants to like he doesn't want to make peace, and Trump said the same, like he wants to fight, and there was so much diplomacy involved in trying to prevent that war, in trying to stop Putin, trying to not let them, like, talk them out of doing it, because everybody knew what was going to happen. And Russians just kept lying and denying, and were saying that it was provocation, it was manipulation, that it's like the West was alienating Russians and like blaming them for everything, and so they kept lying, and they still did it, and everybody watched it. So it is very shameful when some politicians now try to put the blame on Ukraine. This is absolutely unfair, and it's a shame and disgrace. So then it all broke out, and look at Ukraine. 3 years later, standing strong, they occupied actually half of the occupied territories. So what Russia first invaded, Ukrainians pushed back and deoccupied and liberated those territories. And Ukraine still stands strong, and Kyiv is independent, and president of Ukraine is staying strong and confident, and there is much more support now than was before, because the rest of the world is very inspired, right? That's what I
Definitely.
yes, I hear a lot. And me personally, I get depressed sometimes, especially last year when it was already coming to this. The Republican Party started to change their their views, and so last year was probably the hardest for me personally, and I had personal losses in Ukraine, and I visited Ukraine twice last year, and I drew inspiration from people in Ukraine.
Watching that Oval Office meeting and seeing President Trump and Vice President Vance essentially berate Ukrainian President Zelensky, when we're talking about lives lost, there are real costs to this. And Zelensky came there prepared to sign that mineral deal, and things fell apart after what happened. What was your take on the way the meeting went when you saw things devolve into the chaos that we all saw?
Well, I cannot tell you that I was too surprised, because it was kind of obvious that that's sort of how it was probably going on. The negotiations were ongoing and pretty intense, and the two sides were very far apart on what Trump wanted and what the Ukrainians were ready to agree on. And so I think that's I kind of expected that's what kind of how they talked, and it just became public. It just spilled out to, like, through the open door. It was behind the closed door, right? And then we got exposed to it. So it was very unpleasant. I actually watched big part of it live. I got a news notification on my phone, and I was able to open, and I actually saw it live, and it was very unpleasant. Yes, it was atrocious. It was wrong. But that's my conclusion by now, is that Trump and those people who are close to him, they just operate on different set of values. They don't care.
One of there were several takeaways that there were several things that I took away from that meeting. And one of the things that popped out was Trump talked a lot about Zelensky's not being grateful enough, when we've seen that he's continued to thank the US and its people for their support, but also toning down his rhetoric towards Russia. We didn't see much on the opposite end in terms of Trump and or Vance saying that Russia, at least publicly, needs to tone down its rhetoric and stop its actions, and even naming Russia as the aggressor who started this war. What is your take on that, given everything that has happened?
Well, I'm disgusted, and I'm very disappointed. I'm actually, like I said, I'm not too surprised about Trump, because we already knew who he was and where he was going. And if you follow it for a while, and I personally like to read books and follow respectable media and investigative journalists, and I get news from Ukraine regularly. So I was not surprised at all. It was just we always hope. Our human nature is always try to look for nice things, for positive, and to have hope. And so, of course, and I speak to all kinds of people. I speak to people who do support Trump, and they're like, well, they find excuses and they find explanations on why he says so. And so, of course you want to be positive, and I was hoping that it won't be as bad as we expected, but it is as bad, if not worse. No surprise, but very unpleasant, of course. Very unpleasant.
And another aspect of that meeting that I don't think got talked about as much was when J.D. Vance mentioned that Zelensky, quote, campaigned for the opposition. He brought that up during their meeting. And I thought that was like, that just made me pause a bit, because I was wondering, are you going into this negotiation with the thought in the back of your mind that this person campaigned for the opposition? It seemed like there was a bit of contempt in that statement. Did you catch that? And what do you make of that?
Yes, I remember him saying that. And again, what's the point of saying that now? You're already sitting in the White House, in the Oval Office. And we all remember, again, this is just another twisting of truth, to say in a more polite way, because we remember when there was an election campaign and Zelensky came and visited the United States and met with both candidates and presented their peace plan, Ukrainian peace plan, and he met with Trump. We have pictures and videos of it all over the internet, right? So I think that was twisting of facts and manipulation and just berating, yes, just to put down and to sort of affect the morale. And of course, he was out of line completely. He was speaking to a president of a country from a position of being just newly put in a position of vice president. He was out of line. He was disrespectful. Yeah.
And I think that's something that, again, as I think a lot of people were shocked when we saw that. But as you said, we kind of knew where this administration stands when it comes to its stance on Ukraine. And a lot of people on the right have seemed to get in line with that line of thinking. They are changing their view of support. There's a lot of misinformation out there, I found as well, especially on social media, about what the U.S. is giving to Ukraine. People have the idea that it's actual money when we're giving military aid in the form of, old munitions and things of that nature. Can you talk about how, from your perspective, how damaging that is when there's a lot of misinformation about a war, even down to who actually started it? Because we're actually seeing that now as well.
I know,
we all know that Russia invaded Ukraine.
Yeah, this is just like 1984, George Orwell, Black is white,
Yes.
black is white, lies, truth, war is peace. They're trying to distort the reality for us. And I find it's insulting to my intelligence that, I know what I saw and I know what happened, and we all know, right? And them trying to prove us, change facts completely upside down. This is so ridiculous. Well, I cannot speak on how much the United States actually provided to Ukraine. They provided significant amount of support that did make difference in the war. It really helped the military equipment. I myself do not know specifically to this day how much they've given. Information is publicly available, and from my understanding, it seems like about $12 billion total was allocated by the Congress, and the majority of the money, was stayed in the United States, because what Ukraine was given is old, sometimes even obsolete and out of order military equipment that's been sitting in stockpiles for decades. Some equipment dating back to 1960s and 50s. And I know that Ukrainians had to refurbish and repurpose some of that equipment. So, but again, it made a difference. It's still needed, and it helps. And Ukrainians are extremely grateful. And me, myself, and all our people expressed gratitude and said thank yous a million times. So, where Trump gets this blown up numbers of 350 billion, actually, I was specifically looking up into those details. Again, information that's publicly available, anybody can research it. The total expenses of all countries who contributed to Ukraine and Ukraine spending actually amount to lesser amount of that. So it's definitely absolutely unrealistic number. Where Trump got it, I don't know. What I also want to point out, that was not part of the talks, but I think it's an important part of generally how Trump is building his politics, is all these tax cuts and being on the side of super rich billionaires. Elon Musk, for example, he's the richest person in the world right now. And since Trump took office, actually not even took office, since he was elected in November, Elon Musk became richer in a total amount of $200 billion, amount that is definitely greater than the whole amount of total equipment and a little bit of finance that Ukraine got, way more. So one person could have covered those total expenses and still be the richest person in the world. And that's, they don't want us to know. I think they don't want us to think about, and it's not for the benefit of regular people, neither in Ukraine nor here in the America.
True. And just to stay on the finances for a bit, now there's this talk. President Trump has said that he wants the European countries who've also given aid, military aid to Ukraine as well. He wants them to step up and do even more. And I wanted to get your thoughts about that, given that Ukraine is in these countries' backyard. And it seems that with Trump's recent stance, again, he's halted at this point military aid to Ukraine. What should be the way forward for other European countries now that the U.S. has basically done a 180 in terms of its relationship to Ukraine?
European countries have helped a lot. Actually, if you look at the percentage of GDP, what the amount of help was given is United States is like way behind on most of the European countries. European countries have given a lot of military equipment. I know a country that has given all of their howitzer cannons, all they had, not like number of like the US and old ones, but everything they had. Also, another moment that is nobody's talking about here is the Europe is hosting millions of refugees from Ukraine, and they're getting support. They're actually being hosted and being helped. There are social programs that support people that help children. They get free education. They even get free housing in some cases, in many cases actually. So there are millions and millions of refugees from Ukraine that Europe has taken the burden completely. And the United States, they had this U4U program that halted last year. And I know at maximum that only 170,000 people came from Ukraine. And I know personally that up to half maybe of those people already went back to Ukraine, because it's just there is no support here, no accommodations for refugees. And you see all this anti-immigration rhetorics now, that people just feel threatened, harassed, and not welcomed here.
That's unfortunate. Because I think I'm glad that you brought that up, because that is an aspect of this conversation, this tragic situation that gets lost oftentimes, is the human toll. As you mentioned, there are refugees, the European countries are supporting them and have created programs, and people don't often, I think, point that out, that there are people that have been displaced. There's a lot of children that have been affected by this.
Yeah. Yes, unfortunately, a lot of children, and there are orphans left now in Ukraine. Lots of orphans.
One thing that I wanted to talk about as well, President Trump and JD Vance have taken now they say that they're not, but some have argued it's very pro-Russian stance on this situation. And we know that, and that was one of the things that Zelensky was mentioning in that conversation before everything kind of just went chaotic, was talking about not being able to trust Putin's word, because we know that he has broken deals before. For example, the Budapest Memorandum, I believe that was in 2014 when he first broke that. And so if someone is continually breaking deals that are made, the argument is they can't be taken at their word. What is your response to that, in terms of the way that when he was trying to make that argument to Trump in that meeting and the way it was received?
So thank you. Wonderful question, Nicole. It's actually Budapest Memorandum is the one that's most important at this moment, because the United States signed that memorandum as well.
Mm-hmm.
If some people don't know, the essence of it was that after the collapse of Soviet Union in 1991, Ukraine, as the largest, second largest after Russia, Republic of the Soviet Union, and being westernmost, actually ended up having the world's third largest nuclear arsenal. It was United States was one, Russia, and then Ukraine was the third largest nuclear arsenal. And with mostly with the initiative of the United States and pressure, I can say it now, tremendous pressure, Ukrainians were talked into giving up the nuclear arsenal completely, gave away all the nuclear missiles, everything. And in exchange, of course, for security guarantees. Of course, and Great Britain was a co-signer of that agreement as well. So Russia, Great Britain, United States, and Ukraine. And so that was a very big deal. Ukraine could have been a very strong and dangerous country now, right, to the adversaries. And it was left defenseless, like toothless, right? They removed all the teeth from a, if you know, like an analogy, if you remove all the teeth from a dog, for example, right? So, of course, that's why this help to Ukraine now from the side of the United States is not charity. It's actually fulfillment of the obligation that was taken willingly. Not only taken willingly, the United States pushed for it because it meant security for many countries, safety of the world, right, and nuclear proliferation. So Ukraine is a peaceful country. Ukrainians never wanted to invade or abuse any agreements, abuse peace in the world, right? It was always Russia. And so this is the most important one, recent. But actually, I have a list somewhere. There were like a dozen agreements that historically were signed between Ukraine and Russia, starting with Russian Empire and the Ukrainian Hetmanate back in 17th century, and then later on again and again. And we have seen nothing but violation of those agreements, of continued aggression and continued attempts to take over our country and subjugate it and make it part of Russia again and again. So
And
absolutely zero face from the side of Ukrainians that Russia will ever stick to it. And all this intelligence is proving that's why Putin doesn't want peace. He wants Ukraine. He wants to own the territory. And I actually want to point out another thing. I am surprised that Americans are not concerned about that, because what do people think when a big aggressive country takes over another country? Like Ukraine was a very friendly breadbasket of Europe, well known. Ukraine can feed 700 million people alone. Just that's why was a famine got worse in Africa, and prices rose everywhere in the world, because Ukraine is a huge supplier of agricultural products, of grains, of seeds, food, oils. So we had this very friendly country of 40 million people. And then Russia, as we all know, for a very long time, is not a friendly country, is not really a producer. It's known, who called it a gas station country, right? Or what? Anyways, we all know evil empire, and we all know that all they do is pump out natural resources, mostly oil and gas, and sell it, right? And they don't really produce good products. Like, look around yourself and see if you have your favorite Russian brand, right? If you have a Russian computer, if you have a Russian cell phone, or if there are Russian cars driving around. No, we don't have any of that. This is the largest country in the world, very rich in natural resources, and doesn't produce any products that world could benefit. And we know that they're aggressive, and they like to invade their neighbors, and they like to expand their territory. So when that country takes over Ukraine, for example, right, Ukraine is not going to stay the same friendly and peaceful place. It will become, right, either people who continue to oppose will be exterminated, that's what's happening now, or they will have to be turned. And so basically Russia becomes a bigger and more dangerous country. And especially in a military sense, everybody saw now what Ukrainians are capable of. There was there was army basically 3.5 years ago, and now there is a 1 million people army who is stopping the second largest army in the world and doing the job of the whole NATO alliance. And the rest of the world should be really afraid of Ukrainians becoming part of Russia and being forced to do Russia's bidding, right? Whatever next they decide to do, whoever next they will decide to invade, Ukrainians will be forced to be part of it. So this is in the interest of the whole world, to not let Russia to expand and become bigger and more dangerous and richer in resources, all kinds of resources, human and natural.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something that I feel has been missing from the conversation, in terms of, at least with some people on the right, in terms of the fact that Ukrainian security is also U.S. security, because Putin may not stop at Ukraine. And then you brought up a good point, as if he were to take it over, then Ukraine would be absorbed into the Russian military system. And what do you say to U.S. citizens who don't see that point, that Ukrainian security is part of U.S. security, because of what could be the cost if Ukraine falls?
The cost will be awful, and I am the person who doesn't like giving advices, especially to people who don't ask. So if people still staunchly believe in Trump and believe that he's gonna be good for us, for the country, I usually suggest to read books. I am the person who likes to read books, and I like to dive deep into the issues and kind of figure it out for myself. And so I recommend people to try to figure out for themselves, and not just listen to or read short social media posts that only give you just very tiny somebody's insight and suggest somebody's opinion to you. Form your own opinion. Do your own research. Read books. I can recommend books if anybody's interested. But and learn history. It's all in history. It all happened. History goes in spiral, how they say, right? And terrible things have happened. There were 2 world wars just in the last 100 years, a little more now, but in the past century. There are people who fought in World War II still walk the streets, still live to this day. So look to that history. That's exactly how the World War II started, the most recent one that we know more. How Hitler, together with actually Soviet Union, with Russians, with Stalin, invaded Poland and divided it. And when Poland was given in, when the rest of the world, including America, the Europeans and Americans, were hoping that this would be enough, that this would feed into Hitler's appetite, right? And they will stay safe. No, nobody stayed safe. Then everybody had to join in the fight. And if they stepped in sooner, most likely the World War would be prevented. It would be localized and it would be prevented, and it wouldn't be millions and millions of lives lost, and the cost of it skyrocketed, right? Much more. So this is unfortunately the worst. The worst I can say, what it reminds me now, is Trump turning around 180 degrees from the previous American politics, and trying to get all those resources from Ukraine and leaving another half to Putin, to Russia, is exactly like Poland was divided by Hitler and Stalin in 1939. So my suggestion here, my recommendation to people is look into history. There are wonderful movies, even if don't feel like you have enough time to read the whole book. Watch few movies about World War II.
Lastly, just to wrap things up, I wanted to ask you, speaking of Trump, if you were to be able to have a word with him, have a meeting, what would you say to him to get him to truly understand your point of view when it comes to Russia's war against Ukraine?
Thank you. That's a good question. But if I try to imagine, I don't think I would have slightest chance of changing his opinion, just because of how the kind of person he is. He only he's a megalomaniac and narcissist who only believes in his own instincts, in his own words. He doesn't believe he's a high level experienced very reputable advisors. So he wouldn't really, he wouldn't listen to a person like me, and I don't have any illusion of changing his mind. But if I did have a chance, I would just say that, sir, you're becoming a dictator and you're putting the world in a great danger.
Again, thank you, Elena, for hopping on and having this conversation with me. And for those of you listening and or watching, if you like this kind of content, news, politics, and current trends, don't forget to like and subscribe.